Bad news for Democrats in California, as California's Governor Gavin Newsom is officially facing a recall election after over 1.7 million signatures against California's Democrat governor have now been verified. An NBC article highlights how Newsom has been criticized in part for his heavy restrictions put in place during the pandemic, which include businesses and religious services being curtailed. Newsom has called the effort a partisan Republican recall and vowed to fight it. It's interesting to see how Newsom, other Democrats, and some in the mainstream media appear to be freaking out at this news, trying to claim without evidence that only Republicans and people they label as conspiracy theorists were behind the recall. This ABC 7 article says, quote, "At first, Newsom brushed off the effort, but once it became clear it would pass, Newsom and the Democrat establishment honed in on their messaging and began calling the recall a power grab by the extreme right wing." Reporter Liz Kreutz at ABC 7 says, to explore deeper that question of just who is behind the recall and why, ABC 7 News Originals went inside the recall organizers' Northern California headquarters in the final weeks leading up to the signature deadline. ABC 7's Liz Kreutz then tries to label the people behind the recall as conspiracy theorists, saying they brought up what she calls a false conspiracy over how Newsom got into office, as well as at one point having volunteers asking the news team why they were wearing masks. These, of all possible quotes, are the things that Kreutz chooses to highlight in this article. So you can see how the media is desperately trying to delegitimize the organizers behind this recall. And as expected, CNN also appears to be panicking over this news. CNN here tries to further smear organizers in support of the recall. CNN says, quote, "Critics of Newsom had met the state's threshold for a recall election in April, following a sprawling effort to gather signatures in every county that was backed by key Republican strategists. But Newsom and his team have framed the recall as an effort by supporters of Donald Trump and right-wing extremists to wrest control of the government from progressives." CNN adds a quote here, saying, "It is what it is. This is a Republican recall," Newsom said in an exclusive interview with CNN earlier this year. Newsom also told CNN, quote, "An RNC-backed Republican recall of white supremacists, anti-Semites, and people who are opposed to immigration and immigrants is an accurate assessment of who's behind this recall." Another article on this at Fox News opens saying California's effort to recall Governor Gavin Newsom has succeeded in forcing a new election within 90 days following the validation of more than 1.5 million signatures, according to state officials. The California Secretary of State's office confirmed the move Wednesday evening. The recall petition garnered over 1.7 million signatures, of which only 43 were withdrawn, leaving the effort well above the 1.5 million threshold. They go on to explain how the next phase of the recall is now in the hands of the state's Department of Finance, which is tasked with estimating the costs of a special election. The vote must be held within 90 days. A quote from State Assemblyman James Gallagher says, "It's just been one thing after another with this governor, and finally he's going to be held accountable." Gallagher has long criticized the governor for his handling of the pandemic and successfully sued him over mail-in balloting. He went on to criticize Newsom over a bombshell NPR report that found the embattled governor had misled the public on his state's wildfire prevention efforts. Another quote from Gallagher says, "This hits really close to home for me. I represent Paradise, a town that was decimated by wildfire in 2018, and we have kept saying that we need to put more investment into fuel reduction. These fuels have built up in our forests over the decades, mostly because we got rid of any kind of forestry management in California. The governor keeps telling everybody that he's been putting all kinds of money into wildfire prevention, and as it turns out, it's been a fraction of what he's been stating to the California public." One candidate running to replace Newsom said, quote, "Here's an opportunity for Californians to pick a free trial governor for a year. He noted that residents are better off trusting anybody than Gavin Newsom, and that since the term ends in around a year's time, there's not much to lose by giving the governor the boot. Quote, unless, of course, we want to keep seeing billions of dollars going into a funnel and get wasted. Again, they also remind us how Newsom has been plagued by other scandals for months. Ironically, while Newsom advocated for some of the strictest possible lockdowns for California residents, in one case, Newsom was caught on a highbrow dining excursion at a French laundry, which appears to have violated his own shutdown rules. Former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer also said, quote, after years of incompetence under Gavin Newsom, Californians are ready for a change. This movement, which is powered by Democrats, Republicans, and independents, is about rebuilding our economy, cleaning up our streets, and getting our kids back in school. I am proud to lead this recall so we can begin the California comeback for families across this state. They note here that Newsom's recall election will mark the second time in California's history that a recall effort triggered a ballot out of 55 attempts. Please leave a comment and tell me what you think about this latest update. If you liked this video, remember to give this video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And as usual, thank you so much everyone who has been supporting this channel with your donations over at Patreon or PayPal, and with your super chats as well. That's greatly appreciated. You can find either link down in the video description where you can support this channel directly, patreon.com/realityreader or paypal.me/realityreader. And with all the censorship happening here at YouTube, I'll just remind everyone again, it might be a good idea to find me on some alternative platforms as well. I've recently joined a new site, video hosting platform, superu.net. You should be able to find me, Kip Simpson, over at superu.net. I also have my website, realityreader.com, and I will continue uploading videos at odyssey.com. You can find me, Kip Simpson, at Odyssey as well. I will follow up soon. Thanks again.